We're going to go ahead and get started for today. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn. We're very excited to have Julie Cutts presenting today to teach us about digital accessibility essentials for creating and improving our maps and web applications according to the current accessibility standards. Julie is a solution engineer at Esri for the state and local government team. She received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Physical Geography and GIS certification from University of Georgia. Her background includes working with remote sensing and flying drones, working in GIS and local government, and she enjoys working with different data types and bringing departments together. If you have to drop during this presentation at all, we are going to be recording it and uploading it to our YouTube channel. So if you do have to drop, you can't make the meeting, or another person that you were hoping would for one of your stakeholders can't make it, we are more than happy to share that recording with you, but it will also be on our YouTube channel. I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Julie.
Thanks, Randy. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. There we go. All right. So, thank you, Randy. As Randy mentioned, I'm Julie Cutts. I'm a solution engineer at Esri, working with the state and local government team. So very happy to be here and meet with you all today. And going to cover the topic of accessibility and how it is supported in Esri products. So to kick us off, I thought I'd start with a map and start with a very accessible, web accessible map. Can anyone, I guess with the reaction or in the chat, tell me why this map is very accessible? See if I can even have access to the chat right now. There it is. Okay. I hear crickets, which is good. I had to throw in a little bit of an April Fool's joke today. It is April 1st after all. This is not a very accessible map. You can't even tell that I have a layer on top of this particular map. We have these different land use violations points on top of here that are symbolized as green or red for closed or open status. So within here, we can see that, obviously the points are too small, but even if I make them larger, it does help them show up on this particular map. But the colors are not looking so great, and that's because of the current base map with this. So we have the USA topo maps, which I'm sure has other use cases, but does not fit this use with this point feature layer on top, right? So it is not very accessible. We can change it to say like the human geography map or one of the other Esri default base maps within here to more easily read our content. So I thought that'd be a good way to kick off web accessibility in ArcGIS. So switching back to my PowerPoint today, plan on covering that introduction to accessibility and then getting into how you can create accessible content, some tips and available resources. So Esri has a commitment to ensure that the products are accessible and that our services are compatible with the latest assistive technologies under the guidance of current software accessibility standards and guidelines. So in this kind of introduction to accessibility, going to talk briefly about the importance of accessibility in GIS and the people that it impacts. And that importance is, in GIS, is all about access to important data. I'm sure I don't have to stress the importance of GIS data to you all on this call and how it impacts, businesses, daily lives, and how it can be shown through GIS and mapping data visualizations. So on this particular slide, there's a screenshot, an image of a map of air quality in the US, specifically an area where there was poor air quality. So this map contains critical data for people who live in or study these areas to better understand the risks and the living conditions. And because this information is critical, it is all that more important for this data to be made accessible to everyone. So digital accessibility aims to improve access to anything in the digital environment, including websites, applications, and information products. So some people may have a barrier to accessing that digital environment due to a disability or an impairment. And types of impairments could include conditions that affect a person's vision, hearing, physical ability or movement, communication and or speech, as well as their cognitive ability. So if someone is facing one of these types of impairments, they may need a different way to access or consume various digital mediums. And these impairments can be permanent, temporary, or situational. So to support them, people rely on assistive technologies to overcome a barrier to technology. So an assistive technology, it can be any tool, device, or software that helps people to access and use digital content. So these can be things like screen readers, voice recognition, and eye tracking software. Also on this kind of list are more common tools like magnification features when viewing a computer screen, or voice to text to send a quick text message. So many people also turn on captions for videos to fully understand the dialogue as well. And these serve to improve accessibility for digital information. There are many laws about accessibility, and these laws enforce the standards that dictate specific ways to improve that digital accessibility for interactions with information and communication technologies. There are two main acts in the US. I personally don't know too much about the details of them, but they include standards, and both of them are federally set accessibility standards that are regulated by the US Access Board and governed by the US Department of Justice. There are similar laws and standards across the country, so for many, and across the globe, so for many other nations, that they state specific accessibility criteria to instruct organizations. And many of the laws, both in the US and internationally, point to WCAG standards, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So these are internationally recognized coding standards for accessibility that many government organizations have adopted and refer to within their accessibility laws. On Esri's side, Esri observes the latest version of the WCAG WCAG standards, which is version 2.2 level AA. And Esri tests products to be measured against these standards. So to share the results of Esri's evaluations, we produce accessibility conformance reports, including these specific standards. So we call them the ACR, Accessibility Conformance Report, provides information about how the software and applications are measured against that WCAG criteria. And it's presented in this format. I have a QR code at the top of this page, but I'll also have plenty of resource links at the end of this presentation and to send out afterward as well. That links directly to those accessibility conformance reports. So the goal is to provide you all with information, with details about specific products, and give you the full picture of that product's accessibility. So that conformance report will show how products are being evaluated against each criteria. It'll include a description of how the product meets it or does not meet the standard. And then to be clear with this report, it's focused on Esri products. So any content that is created from Esri products, such as different mapping applications, or a configured app, or the map I showed just a moment ago, is not represented by this report. So Esri product teams work to produce a transparent ACR that results from rigorous testing and shows specific details of the product's accessibility. And then we also have to consider changing technology, new product features, and updated releases, which makes these reports and accessibility at Esri an ongoing process. So Esri continues to innovate in the development of accessible technology and includes more accessibility features and functionality with each release. Also, Esri is always open to working with customers to listen and understand accessibility needs and make sure products meet customer requirements. Okay, so creating accessible content and information products with ArcGIS is about applying the principles of accessibility using the tools and features within the applications. So now we'll talk about tips for applying those WCAG criteria in creating maps and applications in ArcGIS. So just as you would plan the right maps and apps for your users, you can plan for accessibility. From the beginning of designing your content, you can work through these kinds of questions. So first, thinking about the audience of the content that you are creating for. So who is the information intended for? Is the audience unknown, or are you targeting specific people who have interest in the data? Is this public-facing content that will go on your city website or on an ArcGIS hub site? Also, what do the users want to know when they see this content? What questions do they want answered? And of course, what level of familiarity do they have with either the data or with GIS or with technology? It's important to understand who those core users are going to be and how they'll be interacting with that information. Second, what is the purpose of the content or data? So what do you want the users to learn from the content? What are you trying to convey? And then what methods will convey your message the best? Is it an application, a simple map, a dashboard, or a combination of different methods? So depending on the message, you can choose the best way to make the content understandable. And then lastly, planning for the data. So considering the data that's going to be presented and of course how it will appear on the map. So you can think about how accessibility can be enhanced through colors, text, tables, narratives, and other media that you choose to include. And if you're including multiple types of data, you can decide how to differentiate that data's visibility without compromising accessibility. And then, of course, continuing to revisit your audience and the purpose and make sure that the app is aligned to meet those needs as the design is being completed. So definitely recommend testing it out with your users as much as you can. And then there are things to check. So planning those appropriate base maps for your data, choosing color schemes with good contrast for the different data that you are planning to share, considering headings and labels, and review that you have headings in a correct order, in logical order, adding in text alternatives, text captions and map descriptions to support screen readers, using plain language narratives to promote the clarity of it, adding a variety where you can, so offering alternative access to data to allow people to have a variety of ways to interact with it, and checking the focus order and keyboard navigation to make sure that keyboard navigation is functional. So I'm going to break these out, each one of these, and discuss how to work through them in ArcGIS and as they relate to some of that WCAG criteria. So starting with the base map. Base map is obviously important for several reasons. Base maps not only provide context, but visual contrast to your data layers so that your map is clear and easy to understand. And it helps support the purpose of the map. So WCAG criteria sets different contrast ratios to abide by. Esri has quite a few default base maps to choose from, so those are important to consider, as well as your organizational base maps. So one of the base maps that is included is the enhanced contrast map shown on the left-hand side. So this base map was created by Esri's cartography team, and the colors used in it are meant to provide better contrast to be able to clearly see the base map features and meet those WCAG contrast guidelines. So it's a process to ensure that, when new features are introduced at each extent, say the different roads or building footprints, that they're not in conflict in color contrast with other features that are present, and that the labels for those roads or points of interest stay clear and meet contrast standards. There is both a light and a dark version of the enhanced contrast map within the default selection as well. And then more recently, there have been enhancements made to the human geography base map that support better contrast. So this is the one on the right-hand side. The labels were made to be a bit heavier, and the label halos were increased to meet that WCAG contrast criteria. There were also changes made to the streets at smaller scales to make the labels more readable. And all of those updates and changes were made to the dark version of the human geography map as well. So as you're planning your content, just encourage you to consider inclusive design throughout the process. And the most important part is to make sure that the base map supports that data being displayed. When the base map is in conflict, you can see that it's not effectively showing the data. And this can create accessibility issues for visibility and clarity, and then become challenging to solve when choosing symbology and designing the data. So on this slide, there are 3 different kind of screenshots of maps here with the same data added to it. So we can see that enhanced contrast base map on the left. While alone, it provides that nice clear contrast with the data layer on top symbolized by different colored triangles. It is actually not a good base map for this. Some of the roads and other features with the way they're colored clash with the point symbol on top, making it hard to read. The dark enhanced contrast base map in the middle provides an issue for the data in some of the gray parts of the map. And then on the right-hand side, a better option may be to go with the human geography canvas to show the data a little bit more clearly. It's more easily readable on that right-hand side, that right-hand screenshot. So it's important to consider the design, the purpose of the map prior to constructing it. You can plan out what base map is going to work best with the data and how you want it displayed. So that's all part of the accessibility, considering the design prior to developing that product that you want to publish and share out to others. There is some flexibility. Really briefly want to highlight the vector tile style editor that's available. So you can customize the vector tile base maps within ArcGIS. And you can see you can open up the vector tile style editor application straight from the app picker. So after launching, you can select something like, in this case, the dark enhanced contrast base map, and adjust some of these features. So if you expand out urban area, you can see the details with it. You can toggle off that visibility within here if you don't want that showing up on the base map. So you can edit some of these styles and then save the edited base map and leverage it within your maps as shown here. So choosing the color scheme and symbology in maps is important to support that color contrast. And that's important because there's so much that relies on color to convey a message. So while creating apps and maps, you should consider the WCAG guideline shown here for the use of color. So that says that color is not used as the only visual means of conveying information. So some people that have color vision deficiencies or other vision impairments that need additional indicators or symbols to discern the colors presented. So one best practice is to ensure that you are adding context to the colors and including an additional indicator for the data. So I'll show some examples in my next slides. All right, so selecting a color scheme. So selecting a good color scheme not only helps to meet those contrast standards, but also helps to tell the story of the data in the map. Color theory using maps is a science which cartographers have studied for decades, and I'm sure that many of you have studied this as well. And if you aren't aware, in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise, there are color ramps that are in categories specifically labeled colorblind friendly so that you can quickly choose colors that have been tested for visibility and contrast. Also, if you have your own set of colors that are specifically branded or approved color schemes for the organization, make sure those address accessibility criteria as well. So Esri has a free tool to help create custom color ramps. So you can utilize the custom color ramp site. It's in Esri's developer documentation, but it can help guide you in selecting an appropriate color ramp for the data. So there's hundreds of color ramps provided on the site, and you just go select a color scheme, whether that's categorical, diverging, or dark. Then you select the number of different colors that you need. Activate the colorblind friendly option. And then you're provided with options and the hex values for each color in the color ramp. So it's a good resource if you want to check out leveraging some different color ramps that way. There's also another site called Color Brewer, which has a similar kind of workflow for selecting like the color scheme, the number of colors, and looking at different color ramps. It's nice that everyone has that color blind friendly option to toggle on. Also, within many of the ArcGIS applications, there are options to verify color contrast as you design the user interface. So here's just an example of when you're configuring the homepage for an ArcGIS Online or Enterprise site. Immediate feedback is provided regarding the text and the background color contrast. So these included color contrast checkers are built in to support your work. And additionally, in many of the app builders, there is a color contrast checker that is available within the color picker. And this can help guide your color choices as you are selecting them within, Experience Builder, dashboards, instant apps. And also, when you start working with feature symbology, it is important to make sure that the symbols are purposeful and intentional. So when feasible, when you can, color should not be the only visual means of conveying that information from the data. So we can see here a map that includes point data symbolized by circles of varying sizes. And the circle symbol in this map indicates the % of households with no internet access. And then the arrows within the circles provide the user information about whether the amount is higher or lower, a simple up or down arrow. So by using the color, the size of the circle, and the icons all together, the data is better communicated and clear to read, which means it is more accessible. And you can test this by using color filters to see how someone with a color vision deficiency might view this data. So on the right, the views have been changed to show how someone with red-green or blue-yellow color blindness might view the data. And with the color ramp chosen and the arrows, the data can still be clearly communicated. In addition to feature symbology, definitely spend time on configuring labels based on a feature hierarchy as well. That's important. So considering which labels are most needed to relay information and at what specific zoom levels. So I've got a short demonstration here of a few options to edit labels and improve color contrast. So within the label styles dialog, can select the font and size and update it within here, adjust the color to a dark gray. Maybe adjust the size to a more readable size. You can also turn on halos for that white outline as well. The lighter shade of the halo improves the contrast against those darker colors. You can have kind of a background enabled as well, or keep it in that halo format. And setting a visible range for those labels to show up in the map. As you are creating content, it is important to review headings and labels throughout your content because it helps to provide context and clarity through the page navigation. So headings and labels can provide your user with clear and organized content to support understanding of that content. They can also convey meaning and structure and group related content together. Headings help screen reader users because the screen reader application relies on those headings for navigation. So to support this, headings need to be programmatically marked up in a way that keeps them organized and in order. So there are specific criteria about headings and labels and instructions and making sure that they appropriately describe the topic and purpose, and that the instruction should be provided when the content requires user input. So in this story map example, I'm going to show a free extension called Accessibility Insights for Web. So it's created by Microsoft and available for Chrome and Edge browsers. So you can toggle on this tool and you'll see that menu of options on the upper right where you can manually do some checks on your application. So turning on the heading, as you scroll through, you can see heading level 1 at the beginning and then heading level 2, 3, and so on in that numerical order. So these heading levels are indicated during that configuration process. And it's important to remember that when creating appropriate headings and creating that content. Labels and instructions can also provide guidance for users, and it is important to include instructions to support user navigation and labels to clarify actions. Within ArcGIS Instant Apps and Experience Builder, you can use a splash screen or the details panel to provide additional narratives or instruction to your users to better understand the map and the data. Instant Apps also provides a widget that shares the keyboard navigation shortcuts for users. So you can enable this to support keyboard navigation for the map, for zooming and panning around. That was released, I think, sometime last year into Instant Apps. Also in ArcGIS Survey 123, you can consider adding written instructions for the form fields for what the user is expected to fill out in the survey, right? So filling out those hints, not just the label for the specific question, asking users to, provide a name, a description, or provide a number if it is a number formatted field. Next, also want to cover adding text alternatives to graphics. So that's an essential part of creating accessible content. So this particular criteria explains that all graphical content has to have a text alternative, and it needs to describe the meaning of images and any other like non-decorative content. So This is where you want to ensure that every image or data visualization has a sort of description, alternative text or caption, or an accessible name. So this helps people who have difficulty perceiving visual content, as well as users of assistive technology, such as screen readers, that can read that text aloud, present it visually, or convert it to Braille. So here in ArcGIS Hub, the dialog provides two fields to add the alternative text and the image caption. So in general, your alternative text should be something pretty concise, very concise description of the image, describe the context of the image on the page. And the caption is read by both visual readers and those using screen assistive technology. So the caption adds a narrative to the message or information being portrayed in the application. So not the same as alternative text. In ArcGIS story maps, any media that is added, including images, maps, and videos, and tables, allows for alternative text to be configured. So the story map builder incorporates alternative text into the HTML code for the media container, so that screen readers know, and you can adjust these alternative texts within here. Something else to consider is plain language narratives when writing. So when you start writing your content, make sure it uses plain language narratives to make the information clear, easy to understand, and that's with that readable criteria, readable guideline, just to ensure that people can read and understand the web content. So plain language narratives is the best practice that aligns with this, and that just means recommending using familiar words, short sentences, simple grammar, proper headings, ensuring your content is readable. And this is a good example of using plain language in this particular map. And this is an instant app for a city of Philadelphia. And you can see it uses language throughout the user interface. So we have the splash screen enlarged on the right-hand side. This acknowledgement appears when you first open the app, and it provides clear information, making it easy for the audience to understand the source of data and its intended use. And then the side panel on the left-hand side explains the data using very straightforward terms, headings as well, and conveys that information that's in the map clearly. So this approach helps make the map more accessible to a general audience and also more welcoming to all users. Again, with a story map example, to assist in the creation of your story map and using plain language and headers, you can use the new Story Map Story Insights pane. It's currently in beta while authoring a story. So Story Insights supports creating a web application that is readable using the desired tone. And I'll just show a quick example of this. Oops. With a story map I already have open. So I've got a general story map here. And once I'm in that edit mode for my story map, I see the option to click Insights at the top. And here I'm given my story insights. So this pane gives me some suggestions I can walk through. It gives a description about this story, its tone, noting that it's informative, its sentiment, neutral, its readability level, saying it's easy to read, a word count, and even estimated reading time. You can use this information to also update your item description within here. So a nice tool for your storytelling with maps. With these suggestions, we have accessibility, where it highlights issues with my current story map. So I can see all these images that don't have alternative text. So let's say I click on the first one. I can type in alternative text just within here if I want to do that. I can also hit suggest, which is going to create alternative text for me based off of the image. So you can see it added a pretty detailed, pretty good suggestion for a kind of static 360 image here, which can be hard to understand what that is. It'd probably be good to note that it's a 360 image within here. So go ahead and save that. I could do this for all of them within here. Oops. Doesn't like this one. So I'll say side by side. Image. So side-by-side scene and oriented image of a streetscape. So I can go back within here, still just working within the pane, and continue to add in captions for the particular images in addition to that alternative text. And then I have this refresh button at the top for it to analyze it again and see those updates that I made for the alternative text within here. So we can see I have alternative text for those. It didn't quite flag these 360 images that are within here, but you can add your own caption beneath those as well. All right, so that shows some of the insights. And let's see, I want to show some other pieces we've covered before I get back into my slides. We'll start with some of those tools. So one of the free tools mentioned, kind of showed this a little bit, was that Accessibility's Insights. So this is a way to manually go through and check things like your headings. You can toggle on the color to test the color within here, and also tab stop, so you can see the order in which it goes when you hit tab on the application. But I'll get more into some of those testing resources later on as well. And then with some of the built-in checkers, I mentioned the different color contrast checkers that are built in. There's also tools in Experience Builder now and recent releases for accessibility. If you find when you're starting a new experience, this A11Y button toward the bottom, you'll want to make sure that this Auto Calculate Element tab, Orders and Fixed Elements or Fixed Layouts, is toggled on. And that helps for screen readers to go through the order that you want in which the widgets are placed. So you have two options here. You also have enable accessibility settings for each widget. So if I toggle this on, this allows me to write a description for what a widget does for a screen reader to read. So now that I have this on, I guess I should have shown it with it off. Let's say I click on our list widget here, and we have our usual configuration. Once I toggle on enable accessibility settings for each widget, we can see I now have a new accessibility setting drop down here, and I can describe the particular widget for screen readers. So I can say that this is a list of each land use violation feature in the map with its ID and related details. Then I can save that to the experience. Okay, get back into my slides here. All right, so back to some of those criterias. There's alternative access to data. So for many of us, it might be easy to quickly scan and understand the data that's presented in a map. But for users who are blind or have low vision or use those screen readers, there should be alternative access to data. So with these so we've got the non-text content with different ways to retrieve information, and then also ensuring the structure and relationships in the content are available to all users. Let's take a look at this. So a few practical ways on how to offer alternative access to data is offering options for providing a way to export the data into different formats like CSV, Excel, or GeoJSON. This allows users flexibility to review the data in a way that's more comfortable to them. So for instance, shown here with ArcGIS Hub, we have the option to download a CSV and other types of formats. Another alternative way to access data would be creating accessible dashboards, charts, and graphs to support the audience in interacting with the data. So an example could be using a dashboard, in this case, to display the data in multiple ways to allow users to consume and understand it. So in this particular example, we have data on US city populations, and it's depicted using a chart, a graph, and a table. So each element can be reviewed using keyboard navigation or a screen reader. So next one on the checklist is to check for that keyboard navigation and focus order. So these two are important parts of accessibility and key for people who cannot use a mouse. So there's different criteria for being able to use with a keyboard alone, and also being able to use that tab key to move forward and moving in a logical way. So it should make sense visually and follow a particular order. So we've got a Microsoft on-screen keyboard shown at the top and kind of show how that keyboard navigation only works when viewing this particular story map. So when the keyboard is activated, the corresponding story map focus areas highlight. So you can see when clicking tab, you can move from the header to different button actions. So you can press the space bar and the map displays areas with, say, the greatest benefit or significant benefit based on those two options. And then tab continues to move us to the next action item in the story map. Pressing enter changes the map display. You can expand that map with the keyboard. You can also tab within here to see the different options once the map is active. So then those keyboard arrows work with the map to be able to pan around within here and zoom in and out of the map. And then tab keeps us moving to the next options, like a home button. So it can be good to always include home buttons in your web maps as well. And then you can hit escape to close out of this. So this criteria's goal is to improve that overall user experience by accommodating diverse interaction methods. And then with focus orders, so I mentioned that accessibility insights for web, you can turn on tab stops within here, and every time you press tab, right, it's going through and putting a number and showing the path for how it will move through and read through that story map. So that covers a lot of the tips and best practices for creating accessible content. It doesn't encompass everything that is required for accessibility, but does give a solid start to creating accessible content. So these are definitely the top points to remember that are related to those WCAG guidelines and criteria, as they have a big impact on your content. And then lastly, in just talking about testing for accessibility, you may need to rely on some tools that will support you in developing content that is accessible to a wide variety of skills and abilities. So for testing best practices, this could be something where you have particular users testing things for you. You have some manual testing, like turning on the headers and using that plugin that we talked about in the browser. There are also automated tests. And the most impactful type of testing would definitely be end user testing, getting other humans to actually test out your applications and work through them. So getting different people to test it out is the most impactful type, but manual can be super helpful as you're designing it as well. And automated testing is going to give you that probably fastest method for testing to automatically run through something. And there are tons of automated tools out there. So Esri's team also uses a combination of those automated, manual, and end user tools to evaluate ArcGIS products. But this gives a list of various automated tools that are out there. Again, the automated tools provide a fast way of evaluating your content and give either code suggestions or highlighting exact elements that might have issues. And then additional testing, including that manual testing. So testing by pressing your own keys on the keyboard to run through some applications. And when you test on a keyboard, make sure you test without using a mouse and use the shortcut keys that are listed to navigate through the application or map and review those actions using just the keyboard. And then also screen reader tools. So that's another way of manual testing for accessibility. So one thing to keep in mind here is that screen readers are specific about which browser combination and operating systems are used. So in this list, you can see different screen readers and then tied to the platform or browser combinations that they tend to work well with. And lastly, of course, testing for color contrast and simulating color vision deficiency. So that's also a big piece. There's plenty of built-in tools to check for color contrast, and then those additional manual tools that you can go through and toggle on to check for contrast. All right, and then lastly, there are tons of resources. I'll put a link in the chat that links out to a lot of different resources for accessibility, but there's also a QR code on this slide. So it contains lots of different blogs, videos, articles from the Esri product team and partners. And definitely refer to these accessibility resources. Also, check out the Esri community for these. Or you can contact the accessibility team. They're always willing to work with customers and get feedback. And then if you're looking for support from Esri, Esri offers technical support to assist with this. And then also for like more general stuff. And then for Esri professional services team, there are specific consulting services focused on accessibility to help you with creating accessible applications or templates, as well as providing various testing, as well as education on accessibility features in products. So that's some of the support from the Esri side. And then, of course, help from Esri business partners like GeoJob. And so in addition to those resources, I do want to make sure to mention the new Digital Accessibilities Fundamentals. It's a new learning plan in the Esri training catalog, and it'll help to learn kind of the basics and see examples of implementing accessibility in ArcGIS products. The WCAG website also has their own training and resources listed out there, and conferences to get more in depth with this as well. All right, I know I'm coming up on time. I'm going to put those resources in the chat right now, actually. And are there any questions? Let me put this.
Brian Price has a question.
Yes. Mine is, and I understand that Esri is working towards compliance, just like
Yes.
we are working towards compliance. But, well, first of all, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. All right. So what my overall question is that of all of the, let's say that I have a landing page from all of my various GIS maps and stuff. Do you believe that the intention is for each and every one of them to be, for example, let's look at that one issue you said to concentrate, or that it has to do with vision and hearing and movement, speech and cognition. So on the contrasting thing, for example, does every one of my maps need to come up default with this contrast, or do I just need to have the capability to switch to contrast? And that's part A of that question. So
Sure.
Part B of that is, does each of my map, do I need to have, for example, 2 versions of each of the maps? One is a high contrast and the other is how I have designed it for my target audience.
Gotcha. 2-part question. So the first part with contrast on your maps, you do need to have that built into, let's see if I can jump back to a different slide, but you do need to have that built into your map. So having that contrast set up front. So if you have your feature layers, your base map, everything needs to have appropriate contrast to make it readable.
By default.
And then, so there are things like options when you're designing and creating the map and the applications to make sure your headers are legible and things like that. So you definitely have to show that on your public facing applications. And then in terms of like maintaining different versions, I would think you'd want to first design probably for the most accessible way. And then if you needed something extremely specific, then it might make sense to have a second version. Does that make sense? So on having the like the color contrast built in.
Yeah, that does make sense. But just on the contrast issue, does each of my maps need to be by default set so that all maps are by default, when people first go to them, ready for a disabled individual? Or let's say my public parcel viewer, you know, that then, or does it, because it was designed with a particular audience, and then does the capability need to be in there to switch to the contrast, or does it need to be made for the disabled and then have the not disabled switch to not disabled stuff? That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, so you'll want to design around that contrast as best you can, especially when you're just sharing that application or map to the public. So, and especially with that like kind of initial landing page of the map, I know, we have tons of maps out there that maybe things get cluttered when you toggle on different layers as you're working with it. So that can definitely happen, but maybe that initial view of what is loaded, right, and how the user sees it is clear and easy to read. I think that'd be the goal, to design that up front.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And inside the chat, we also had a comment that we can't get away from PDF maps sometimes. What is Esri doing in the accessibility space for PDF maps, tagging elements, alternative text, document titles, language, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question for PDF maps. I do know there are accessibility tools in ArcGIS Pro. So we do maintain that as well, in addition to like web mapping. So that would be probably the first place you go to check for generating those PDF maps in an accessible way, would be the Pro accessibility features within there. And then of course, all of it, is tied to how you design those maps. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions for Julie? Well, thank you so much, Julie, for your presentation. We greatly appreciate your time and also helping us prepare for this compliance. Oh, Brian has another question.
Yep.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do the clap. My bad. Sorry.
Oh, gotcha. No problem at all. You were just raising your hand. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Julie. I appreciate your time and for helping us get all of our maps and applications up